Chapter 44-44. Let's go. Tong Lansu glanced back at them, and immediately stepped on, turning into a streamer, first shot towards the windy area. Yang Jian Wushuang and others followed closely, like a sharp knife, stabbed directly into the Fengfeng area. Alas! In the howling zone, black howling winds tore the void, and terrible sound explosions continued to sound around. This black howling wind is enough to tear the monks below the Supreme directly into pieces. Even if they cross the Supreme, they feel a slight pain. Fortunately, they are the mainstays in the universe, and they are the big names who dominate the party. Although these black squall winds can cause trouble to them, they are just that. Wu Jian's warrior urged the Chaos Domination body, and the lines of God's veins flickered suddenly, and the whole body was exposed to intense golden light. The wind that was originally like a knife cutting meat suddenly became soft like a spring breeze. Roar! Roar! He stared at a giant starry sky, hiding in the howling wind, roaring and roaring. These starry beasts are all composed of meteorites. Except for the instinct to kill, there is almost no fear. Wu Jian Wushuang didn't need to draw a sword at all. He just punched out with a punch, which was to pull the force of 1,000 mountains and directly collapse an inch of starry beast. Others also used their own means of casting, and the magical powers flew and bombarded for a while, crushing a starry beast instantly. Gradually, Jian Wushuang and others gradually deepen into the deep wind belt. Lan Su walked in front, and Shen Sheng said, "Be careful, not far away is the most dangerous place in the howling belt, with the existence of the Beastmaster of the starry sky. If it is just one head, it is nothing, but if it causes a beast tide, it will pose a threat to us." Therefore, everyone whispered a little, no noise, disturbed the existence of the Beastmaster level. Everyone nodded when they heard the words, and understood the heart. Alas! The people were not slow, and soon they reached the depths of the wind belt. I saw a starry beast that was several times larger than it was just now, and was asleep in the wind. There was a strong breath that was taken from them. Even if everyone was supreme, it also felt a slight dignified meaning. Tong Lansu walked in front of her, and turned her back to a gesture of hush, motioning everyone not to make a sound. Suddenly, when Jian Wushuang passed by a giant monster king, suddenly, a black light wave was shot by Long Qing, who walked at the end, and smashed into the starry monster king next to Jian Wushuang. Boom! Suddenly, the body of this star beast king burst violently, and countless black beast blood fell on Jian Wushuang's body. Howling, howling dash! Howling, howling dash! In an instant, the entire howling belt fell into a riot. Countless heads of giant beasts awakened, opened their eyes, and stared at Xiong Wushuang. They noticed it on Jian Wushuang and killed the same kind of breath. In a moment, countless heads of the beast king of the sky flew fiercely towards the sword unparalleled. Long Qing. Lin Lansu's face suddenly gloomed, and he looked back at Long Qing and said, "Long Qing, what do you mean? I said it again and again. Don't disturb this starry beast. Have you put my words in your ears?" Others also frowned. This seat is not intentional, careless. Qi Longqing spread his hand and said with fearlessness, "If the of the universe is here, he will not dare to presumptuously. This Blue Su is only an apprentice of the universe, and his strength is not as good as him. Although he is unwilling to offend, he cannot talk about how much fear." Wu Tai Luo's Excalibur came out of the sheath instantly. The sharp sword pressure spread. The sword had no double-sided expression, but the heart was sneer. He had long guessed that this guy, Long Qing, would overshadow him here. Cut! A giant roar rushed towards the sword. Wushuang, a sharp sword blade, has been severely cut off. This sword slashed the entire wind howling belt directly, and the sky was torn directly to both sides. Roar! I saw this starry monster king, who was already comparable to the supreme strength, was cut into two directly from beginning to end, and countless blood fell. However, this sword of Jian Wushuang not only did not let those starry beasts retreat, but rushed towards the sword Wushuang even more crazy. In just a few breaths, Jian Wushuang was drowned in the huge beast tide. King Zhoujia, Zhou Shengzi and others frowned and were about to help, and saw that Lan Su's face was not very good looking and said, "Don't shoot, let Jian Wushuang solve it by himself, otherwise it will only inspire a greater beast tide, we all have to be pulled in." The words fell, and he gave Long Qing a cold look, and there was a disgust in his eyes. Roar roar tilde. I saw the sword Wushuang submerged in the tide of beasts. The Tai Luo divine sword continued to be chopped, and each sword was taken away to take away a starry giant. Sure enough, killing can help increase the power of the Taro Excalibur. In the center of the beast tide, Jian's eyes flickered, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Since he got the Taro sword sheath, he found that with each killing, the power of the Taro Excalibur will be stronger, and the vertical eyes of the sword handle will become more demon. Especially the stronger the enemy's strength is, the greater the improvement of the Taro Excalibur. For example, after beheading Yu Ding Supreme, he felt the power of the Taro Excalibur, at least by 10%. Don't look like it is only 10%, but for today's Jian Wushuang, the power of 10% is already a huge improvement. The most important thing is that with the existence of the Taro sword sheath, he does not have to worry about the impurities that the Taro Excalibur will absorb too much. www.mtl novel. Affects the quality. Because you only need to put them in the scabbard for 1 or 2 to warm up, these impurities will be cleared up. When I saw this starry beast, Jian Wushuang naturally saw the hunting delight, and I was still thinking about how to trigger the beast tide, and justly slaughtered to enhance the power of the Taro sword. I never imagined that Long Qing would be better, and sent the beast tide directly to his hands. However, the starry beast king in this area is limited after all. After a few hours of fragrant incense, the starry beast king was slaughtered, and the ordinary starry beast did not have much effect on Jian Wushuang. Yang Jian Wushuang closed the sword and returned to the sheath. His expression came out step by step from the center of the beast tide. Wu Longqing looked at Jian Wushuang's unscathed appearance, and could not help but feel boring. He shook his head and said, "What kind of star monster is really wasteful and useless?" Lan Su saw that Jian Shuang was okay, and he felt a little relieved, and then stared at Long Qing with a cold vigilance, and said, "I would advise some people, if they bring their personal hatred to the extraterrestrial battlefield, blame me, report it directly to Master and punish the family behind you." After I finished speaking, he snorted and led the crowd again, and led the other side across the wind. After a while, the 11 swordsmen and the Supreme Master passed through the wind band safely. A camp in the void appeared before the crowd. Chapter 44-45. Arrived. Lan Su stopped and smiled slightly. We are in front of the camp." Everyone heard the words, couldn't help looking at each other, their faces were all novel. I saw a dormitory palace sitting in the void, and from time to time I saw the Supreme-class strong man hurriedly walking around. Among them, there was still a lot of Supreme staleness, and the body was wounded. That Supreme? Hasn't he disappeared hundreds of times of chaos? And that one, but the imitation Supreme who once became famous in the universe. The entire universe thought he had fallen, and he never thought he would have been outside the battlefield. Kangwa Supreme is the one whose body was on the verge of breaking just now, right? When Kangwa Supreme was so strong, he suffered such a serious injury here. It seems that the vagrants of the virtual universe are very difficult to deal with. Everyone's faces were full of solemnity. At this moment, an elementary and Supreme will march in one step, arching his hand, saying, "Lord Lan Su, God of the universe has been waiting in the main hall for a long time. As soon as I saw you, I asked you to go to the main hall to hear the announcement." Yes. Shi Lan Su didn't dare to delay, and quickly took the sword Wushuang and others and walked towards the main hall. In the main hall, the Jew is sitting on the throne, but now he is much more tired than he was at the cosmic event of the universe. Wu Jianshuang saw goodbye this time, and he had a little more respect in his heart. If it wasn't for the god of the cosmos, he would have turned the tide. I'm afraid that the entire universe would have been destroyed once and destroyed by the virtual men of the virtual universe. And since these tens of thousands of chaos periods, while the of the universe was sitting in the extraterrestrial battlefield, he was taught nothing, and he has cultivated a large number of strong men in the universe. I can say that there is a large part of the reason why the entire universe can be so stable today. It must be attributed to the of the universe. I'll wait and see Lord Iogo. The 11 supreme men were all whirling, half knelt on the ground, and said with arched hands, "No need to be polite." Wu Ju God smiled, stretched out his hand and held it up, and suddenly a soft force poured out to lift everyone up. Immediately, the God of God looked around at everyone, and said, "Everyone wants to know something about the virtual universe." Everyone nodded, groaning. Well, the old man will not go into too much details about the virtual universe. The old man will now tell you about the situation in the extraterrestrial battlefield. Speaking of this, there was a touch of tolerance on the face of Jew God, and with a wave of his right hand, a picture suddenly emerged out of thin air and was exposed in front of everyone. In this picture, a full 3-foot-long void crack stood like a mysterious gate in the void. Countless terrifying monsters roared out of the void crack. Some of these monsters have 3 heads and 6 arms, some have huge tails, and some have eyes all over their bodies. Their breath is completely different from ordinary supremes such as Jian Wushuang, but their strength is far beyond the supreme realm. Beyond the crack, a supreme team led by the invincible supreme, followed by the monsters to fight with these monsters. Fighting to the extreme, from time to time, you can see the powerful who has the supreme level fall from time to time. The Supreme Lord who is famous in the depths of the universe on weekdays is like a rain falling on that battlefield. No one flinched, no one was afraid, everyone fought to the last minute. There was nothing in the hall of the grandmother, and no one thought that this extraterrestrial battlefield had reached this step, and it was so tragic. 5,000 years ago, for some reason, the void crack suddenly became large, and a large number of virtual monks poured out of it. Moreover, these virtual monks did not fight as they did before, but they held groups together. If they are wrong, they can move forward and backward freely, and they should be led by one force of the virtual universe. The god of phonology opened his voice in a deep voice, and there was a dip in his eyes. As soon as this remark was made, everyone's face changed slightly. If according to the of the universe, the virtual cosmos in attack at this moment is only from a sectarian force, then it is not difficult to calculate that the strength of the opposite universe is far beyond their imagination. After all, now they have gathered the top combat power in the universe and gathered here to resist the attack. In other words, that is, the universe itself can only compete with a sectarian power of the virtual universe. Jew God glanced at the changing faces of everyone, and continued to say, "This is not much, mainly because the crack has become bigger and bigger. I'm afraid it won't take long for this crack to open completely and form a channel. By that time, I am afraid that the opposite virtual universe will bring the whole army under pressure, and if we stay dead, the entire universe will fall into catastrophe again." Hissing. Everyone took a cold breath. Among them, one of the Supremes asked, "Master God, can't you even wipe out these false men?" The god of Jew looked at him and said in a deep voice, 3,000 years ago, a huge dark arm bound by a chain was stretched out in the void crack. The old man made a move with this dark arm, although he forced it back however, it can be sensed that the master of this black arm is afraid of not being weaker than the old husband, and even being able to be in the middle with the old husband. As soon as this discourse came out, it was definitely not worse for everyone. Even the sword is unparalleled, and his face is dignified to the extreme. God looked at everyone with a nervous look, and couldn't help but smile and said, "Of course, the words of the husband above, there is no room for salvation. Now everyone just needs to resist the offensive of the virtual universe, and the husband will look for 7 handles." One of the ancestral soldiers of Zhentian Shinchi, once the old man finds Zhentian Shinchi, it is very likely to completely seal the void crack. Okay, now you know the situation in the extraterrestrial battlefields. Remember, the old man just said the word must not be rumored, otherwise the universe will be shaken and people's hearts will be upset. It crashed. After the god of Wu Ju spoke, he looked at Lan Su and asked, "Lan Su, now you break them up and put them into the 9 teams, under the control of the 9 teams." Yes, the disciples obey. Shi Lan Su nodded quickly, and led the 11 Supremes, including Jian Wushuang, to join the 9 teams in the camp. In the battlefield outside the realm, the Jew is in charge of overseeing the overall situation. Each major team is Invincible Supreme as the captain, and under the captain, there are 2 deputy captains. These 2 deputy captains are often half-step Invincible Supreme, or Top Supreme Supreme. Wu Lansu led the crowd, broke it up, and joined the 9 teams. And Jian Wushuang was assigned to the 7th team. Chapter 44-46. The 7th team's camp is in a lush bamboo forest. Ran Lansu did not send Jian Wushuang in personally, but informed Jian Wushuang that the master of the god had transmitted the sound to the 7th team, and let Jian Wushuang directly go in to report. Before he left, Lansu also kindly reminded Jian Wushuang to say that the 7th team leader He Yuan Supreme had a bad temper, but his nature was not bad. If there was a discord, let Jian Wushuang be more tolerant. He Yuan Supreme. Yang Jian Wushuang was in a black robe, holding the slanted Tai Luo Excalibur sword handle at his waist, walking into the bamboo forest step by step. He Yuan is supreme, he is no stranger. There are not many invincible supremes in the universe. Almost every one is famous and glorious. He Yuan is supreme, among the invincible supreme realms, its reputation is at the forefront. If Ruo Tai Luo is said to be the first sword of all ages, then He Yuan Supreme is the first sword of all ages. He Yuan Supreme took the sword into the path, and 8,000 chaos prehistoric eras claimed the invincible supreme realm. However, he has always been alone, so he has not left any Taoist forces in the universe. The universe does not know much about him. A piece of bamboo leaves fell swiftly, and the more you walked in, the more open the path in the forest. It didn't take long for a bamboo house to appear in front of the sword without double sides. The door of the bamboo house opened, and more than a dozen supremes sat cross-legged at the door. They were wearing uniform white robes. After seeing Jian Wushuang, their eyes were full of novelty, and they kept looking up and down. The name of Wu Jian Wushuang, although they have been staying in extraterritorial battlefields, I have heard of it occasionally, what seems to be the first genius in the universe today, and has the power to leapfrog. In this regard, they are doubtful. Wu Jian Wushuang also looked at them. There were a total of 20 Supreme Masters, all of whom were above the Supreme Master, and one of them was a Supreme Master and a half-step Invincible Master. The two men's robes are also different from other Supremes. Although they are also white robes, they are sewn with gold threads at the corners of the robes. These two people should be the vice-captains of the 7th team. Wu Jian's pupils shrunk slightly, both of them have the spirit of killing. Just a glance, there was a terrifying intention. Wu Jianshou continued to raise his head and looked toward the deepest part of the bamboo forest. There was only one person standing. The man is extremely tall and burly, carrying a long black knife on his shoulders, and wearing a large white scorpion. The large satin embroidered on the back of the shovel is the large 7 team's word, and his back is facing the sword. Sunder just stood there, just like Taishan Hungyue stood in front of him, a huge coercion spread. Next moment, the person slowly turned around. A face with long scars, a square face, not angry, appeared in Jian Wu's eyes. For this person, he is the captain of the 7th team, Invincible Supreme He Yuan. He Yuan Supreme, with the sword to enter the path, the universe has been famous for 9 days and 10 Invincible Supreme. He is full of monstrous spirits. Jian Wushuang just touched his eyes in the air and felt a terrible horror, enough to cause the suffocating cold intention. At first glance, I know that this person is definitely a super strongman who walked out of the blood of the dead. Sword unparalleled. He Yuan Supreme raised his eyelids and looked at Jian Wushuang with an expressionless expression. He Yuan Supreme. Qi Jian Wushuang's expression was indifferent, and he saluted slightly. He Yuan Supreme nodded his head and said, Jian Wushuang, this seat has heard of you. You seem to be the first genius in the universe right now. No matter how amazing your talent is, this ugly word is in front. This seat needs as a reminder, when you enter this extraterrestrial battlefield and your majesty, you should not bring your arrogant arrogance as the first talented genius. Here, you only need to know 4 words and obey. Alive. Do you understand? Jian Wushuang heard his eyes narrowed and saw He Yuan's expression indifferent, so he nodded and said, Relax, I understand. Well, this is also for your good. He Yuan Supreme paid attention to Jian Wushuang's look. Seeing that Jian Wushuang was not like those other geniuses, when he heard that his face was full of disapproval, he couldn't help his face slightly, nodding. Well, Rongrong, you take the sword unparalleled to change into the uniform of our 7th team. Yes, Captain. One of the 2 deputy captains, among them the top Supreme Xiao Wei, and a short hair of the Honorary Supreme Congratulations, and then looked at Xiongjian Wushuang smiled. Warriors Supreme, please hear. Trouble. Wu Jiansu nodded at him. A moment later, under the leadership of Rongjing Supreme, Jian Wushuang quickly changed the clothes of the 7th team. Like everyone else, he was dressed in a plain white robe, chest position, and embroidered the word 7 teams with black lines. Wu Shuang Supreme, the captain's words just now, don't take it to heart. The captain, he is a straightforward character, not intentional against you. Every one of us who has just entered the 7th team, the captain will click it, because you are afraid that we are too aggressive and not stable enough to lose our lives on the battlefield. Rongji Supreme smiled. Wu Jian Wushuang nodded his head, signaled to understand. The two of them chatted while walking. Basically Rongjing Supreme introduced them, while Jian Wushuang listened silently, nodded from time to time, and made clear. After some conversation, Jian Wushuang's impression of this honorable Supreme was quite good, and did not feel that his position and cultivation were higher than Jian Wushuang. He was aggressive, but rather mild. Well, Jian Shuang, in front of you is your harem. If there is no war, the team has no restraint on individuals. You can cultivate with peace of mind, but if a war occurs, you will receive a message from Captain He Yuan. Regardless of what's on hand, be sure to come and gather as soon as possible, otherwise Captain He Yuan's thunder is not easy to extinguish. After Rongji Supreme said, he gave Jian Wushuang a token and strode away. Wu Jianshou narrowed his eyes, and immediately opened the gate of his own palace, and went in one step. This dwelling house covers an extremely large area. A futon is placed in the center, and a matrix method is drawn next to the futon, which can make the monk sitting on the futon quickly recover the divine power. Creak. Wu Jianwu closed the door, sat cross-legged, his eyes flashed with thought. Whenever you come, you can rest assured. The crisis in this extraterrestrial battlefield is perilous. Even the invincible Supreme is in danger of falling. The danger is far from comparable to the universe. I am still too weak now. You must first think of ways to improve your strength. Qi Jian Wushuang silently whispered to himself, immediately closed his eyes, began to condense his strength, and hit the medium to supreme state. At the same time, King Nine Dragons, Long Qing and others settled down. Among them, Long Qing stepped up into the sky and directly joined the 3rd team to make up for the fallen vice-captain position of the 3rd team and become the 3rd team vice-captain. Time flashed, Ijia time passed. Chapter 44-47, at the same time. Millions of miles away from the universe camp. It was like a vertical eye, and the cracks about 10 feet in length were constantly twisted, and a breath completely different from this universe was taken from the inside. The starry sky before this crack has turned into a surer hell. Ha 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 ha, a bunch of weak and poor garbage. A monster with a huge body, an upper body, no head and neck, and a human face on his stomach, laughed wildly. I bang 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 tilde. There was a scarlet shockwave, like bombs, bombarded wildly. On the left shoulder of this headless monster, there are 5 traces of long marks like claws, especially evil. 5 marks voids. The 8th team responsible for guarding the cracks in the void heard a terrifying hiss. 5 marked voids, corresponding to the invincible supreme level strong in this universe. The leader of the 8th team, Zero Wood Supreme, holds a sharp gun in his hand that can tear the sky, and his expression is dignified to the extreme. Kill this seat. The next moment, Zero Wood Supreme opened his mouth coldly, and when he stepped on it, he suddenly turned into a streamer and killed the headless monster. Yes. Behind him, more than a dozen supreme powerful men forcibly suppressed the fear in their hearts, and each performed their magical powers and rose into the sky. Babu General, eat this bunch of garbage. The headless monster saw the face growing on the chest, sparks of excitement flashed in his eyes, stepped under the heavy footsteps, stretched out his big hand and grabbed at the Zerowood Supreme. Behind him, 8 shadows stepped out of the darkness. Hiss, it's delicious. A monster with 3 snake heads and a lower body is a human monster. Oh, the taste of meat is really fascinating. A monster with a very fat body, like a ball, a monster with its mouth and jaw cracking all the way to the back of the ear, laughs vaguely. Kill them. A strange man who looks like a horned warrior, but has thick and sharp fangs, growls with excitement, and the fighting in his eyes is crazy. The 8 people are extremely weird. On their left shoulders, several long marks are shining. Among them, the man with the least long marks, a man with a pale face and black eyeshadows under his eyes, also has 2 long marks. That is to say, these 8 generals, the least powerful, are also medium to supreme. Hey! The next moment, the 8 flashed their bodies, disappeared behind the headless monster, and looted towards the 8th team. What? For a moment, countless screams sounded. A medium supreme, just rubbed by the palm of the headless monster, instantly burst into blood mist, extinct. This starry sky was directly stained with blood. Damn! Zerowood Supreme looked gloomy, and the dragon spear in his hand strangled all directions. Senhan's gunman was enough to explode dozens of stars together. Boom! This shot exploded, and the vast sky was instantly torn open to a huge mouth, and a sound explosion sound burst instantly, as if being stabbed by Zerowood Supreme instead of a gun, but a 9-clawed dragon of arrogant world. Under this gun, the whole world must bow to his head. Ha ha ha, good job. I ate you. The headless monster laughed even louder. There was a dark wave of destruction, condensing in front of his chest. Void explode. Universe base camp. Jack. On weekdays, almost all the gods of the universe are beautiful and cheerful, but this time they have changed to the gentleness of the past, and the coldness in their eyes is extremely cold. Wu Ju stood up, raised his head to look at the endless void, countless avenues evolved in his eyes, and the darts flowed, forming yin and yang. His eyes directly passed through the endless void, and saw the tragic battlefield outside the cracks of void. Senhan's voice came from his mouth. Pass the old husband's order, the 6th and 7th teams, immediately go to the cracks in the universe and support the 8th team. Yes. Lan Su had a dignified expression and knew in her heart that this time it was a big deal. 7th team, camped among the daggers of Wu Jianshuang. Warriors Supreme immediately got up and hurried to the main hall, 100,000 in a hurry. A voice sounded like a thunderous thunder in Jian Wushuang's head. Wu Jiansu slowly opened his eyes, and a regret flashed across his face. Just a little bit, just give him a little more time, he can break through the middle extreme. At that time, his combat power will be upgraded again. Nothing. Wu Jianshou shook his head and knew in his heart that Supreme Heiyuan was so anxious to convene them, for fear that something urgent had happened in the battlefield outside the realm. There was no more delay, and the sword unparalleled stepped out, as if he had shrunk the ground into an inch, and the whole person instantly disappeared into the palace. Everyone is here. Heiyuan's face was ugly, his eyes glanced over the team members in front of him, and he saw that everyone had gathered, which made his face look better. You, Lord Elder God has orders, I need to rush to the void of the void immediately, Heiyuan Supreme said in a deep voice. As soon as this remark was made, everyone could not help but look at each other. Captain, why is this so urgent? Hasn't the crack in the void been stable recently? What's wrong? A team member asked in confusion. Heiyuan heard the words and looked at him, took a deep breath and replied, there was a riot in the fissure in the void, and a 5-mark virtual soldier led the team. What? 5 marks? Several Chaos Ages haven't appeared in 5 marks, have they? If the time is right, the 8th team of Zerowood Supreme is now patrolling the void crack then, aren't they over? Everyone's face changed. Heiyuan Supreme had a heavy expression, nodded his head after hearing the words, and slowly replied, yes, according to the news from Master God, the 8th team is almost completely annihilated, leaving only Zerowood Supreme and a deputy captain, holding on with a few player. After speaking, Heiyuan Supreme took a deep breath, no more to say, and said, okay, it is not too late, you wait to set off quickly with this seat, to support the 8th team. Fight for this time from the cracks in the void. The dummies that have emerged are wiped out on the extraterritorial battlefield. Yes. Everyone should be shocked, with 3 inches of war in his eyes. Wu Jianshuang also flickered his eyes full of war. He remembered that the emperor who killed Tao Supreme was the virtual universe, and he accepted the inheritance of Tao Supreme, and sooner or later had to kill the emperor and complete Tao's last wish. Therefore, he had better be familiar with the way the virtual universe fights. And is also in desperate need of a battle to become the final breakthrough in the supreme stepping stone. Go. Suppress the war. With a wave of his hand, Zhong Heiyuan took the lead and turned it into a billowing black wave, which suddenly rose into the sky and rushed towards the extraterrestrial battlefield next to the fissure in the void. Yang Jian Wushuang and others have performed their magical powers closely, followed closely behind. Chapter 44-48. Boom boom. Ha 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 ha. Go dying dying dying. The headless monster Zhong chuckled smirkly. One after another the crimson shockwaves kept blasting out from the palm of his hand. These crimson shockwaves exploded in the starry sky like a bomb, and the entire starry sky trembled with scars. Fortunately, this battle occurred in this extraterrestrial battlefield. Otherwise, if it is in the depths of the universe, relying on this person's horrific power, I am afraid that even the depths of the universe, even with thousands of starfields, will be destroyed by him. Damn. The Supreme stepped on a meteorite half-knelt, and his chest violently undulated. At the moment, the shotgun that was made from the dragon bones and dragon souls of 3 generations of dragons had been cut in two. Captain, what do you do now? We can't hold on for long. Qingguang Extreme, the deputy captain of the 8th team, whispered. Zanmumu Supreme looked back, and his face suddenly became extremely embarrassed. The 8th team was almost wiped out. In addition to the deputy captain Qingguang Supreme alive, there were only 2 players remaining. The 2 were also seriously injured. The body was on the verge of collapse and would fall at any time. Fighting power at all. He took a deep breath, and Zerowood Supreme asked in a deep voice, "Is there any news back from Lord Elder God?" Shi Qingguang nodded supremely, and quickly replied, "Captain, Lord Ju God said that the 6th and 7th teams have been sent, and they are on their way." "Is this the 2 guys, Luxai and Heiyuan?" Zerowood Supreme heard his face a little slower, then took a deep breath, and the killer flickered in his tone. "Still a few more incense sticks. Be sure to all these monsters the burial is here." Boom tilde. Extreme divinity, a thought of the kingdom of God. Suddenly, Zerowood Supreme clasped his hands, and countless black chains spread out around him, forming an eternal kingdom. "Come in." He Lingmu grabbed his right hand, and immediately caught the headless monster with 5 marks in his mind. Kill. Suddenly, the deputy captain Qingguang Supreme also had a murderous act. He displayed the supreme supernatural power that destroyed the heavens and the earth, and blasted towards the 8-part. Tickling. Zhong Heiyuan Supreme took the lead and walked in the forefront. More than 20 supreme masters such as Jian Wushuang followed closely, continuously performing the movement technique, jumping and flickering in the void. After about half a column of incense, Heiyuan Supreme stepped out of the sky, and sprinted forward. "There is a crack in the void ahead, everyone be careful." He took a deep breath and looked up. At this glance, I couldn't help but feel cold. I saw that not far ahead, beside a crack like a vertical eye, it had turned into a surer purgatory. Countless blood floats in the void, and there is a wave of divine power after the Supreme falls. A strange man with 3 snake heads is biting a Supreme in his mouth, chewing and biting. This Supreme has not died yet, his eyes are distantly looking into the distance, his eyes are full of despair. On the other side, the headless monster's big hand clutched Zeromu Supreme's head, as if raising a chick, madly bombarded in the air. "Weak, weak, weak. You are too weak." The headless monster yanked his hands fiercely, tearing Zerowood Supreme into 2 pieces, and throwing them aside like throwing a sack. Card. I haven't waited for Zerowood Supreme's body to be reorganized and resurrected again. The headless monster has already strode away, lifting its huge feet, and stepping on the Zerowood Supreme's body. "I dare." Heiyuan Supreme saw this, and immediately fell into rage. Dead. He stomped his right foot and turned it into a shard of darkness that ran across the sun and the moon and went straight. With this knife, Daomong surpassed 100,000 miles and traversed Xinghe to sweep the sun and the moon. Ding. For a moment, this knife was severely split on the right leg of the headless monster that was about to step down. A half-month arc of dagger flashed, and with a tear, the entire right leg of this headless monster was cut off instantly. Raw. Suddenly, The headless monster roared in pain and stepped back a few steps. Xingmu, you can't do this. Heiyuan Supreme reached out and raised Zero Wood Supreme, who had reorganized his body. Heiyuan, this guy is hard to deal with. Zero Wood Supreme gasped slightly, his expression solemnly said. Another one. The face on the headless monster's chest, his eyes twinkling, constantly looking at Heiyuan Supreme. Alas! I saw countless tentacles pouring out of the wound of his severed right leg, and then a flash of light flashed, these tentacles condensed into a huge right leg. Injury, instant recovery as before. Let's go. The headless monster grunted coldly and turned to re-enter the void crack. Behind him, Babu will sneer and shake his head. Want to leave after killing someone? A cold voice sounded in the void. Soon afterwards, he saw a thin young man wearing a white robe, walking out of the void and step by step, cutting off the path of the headless monster. On the back of the white robe, the huge dazzling 6th team is embroidered with black thread. The 6th team captain, Brook Supreme, came. Behind him, more than 10 players walked out side by side. Zhu Shengzi joined the 6th team. He nodded toward the sword Wushuang, shouted the leader of the line. Qi Jian Wushuang slightly jaw head, knowing that things are urgent at this moment, not a moment of chatting chills, he ordered a voice to let him live well. Oh! The face of the headless monster's chest twisted, and he glanced back at Xuanqi Supreme, then turned his head to look at Heiyuan Supreme. Instead of being afraid, he opened a radiant arc of excitement and whispered in a low voice, interesting, really interesting. Next moment, he lifted his head sharply. Zhong angrily laughed. Babu generals, eat them. Boom. Countless energies condensed in the palms of his palms, and he saw that there was a huge mouth in his palms. Open this mouth, and the crimson lightwave cannonballs condensed out instantly, blasting towards Heiyuan Supreme. Heiyuan Supreme slashed the huge knife in his hand and blasted a shell that smashed over, whispering coldly, 7th team, kill. Yes. All members of the 7th team are roaring and using various magical powers to kill those 8. Hiss. Among the 8 generals, the monster who had 3 snake heads but had a human body suddenly spit out the letter strangely and smiled. There is food coming to the door again. He narrowed his eyes, his face was full of greed, his turquoise pupils twisted, his eyes continued to glance across the faces. Finally, his eyes fell on Jian Wushuang. Interesting, so small and weak, dare to come to trouble us? Huh. He stomped his right foot, and suddenly turned into a ghost, rushing towards the sword unparalleled. Chapter 44-49. The first is more. It was just a lapse of time. The 3 snake-headed monsters had already appeared in front of Jian. Was double-sided, opened enough to swallow the mouth of Sun Moon Snake, and bite hard at Jian Wushuang. There are countless stench winds blowing at you. 4 marks. Topic stream. Wu Jian's expression was dignified, and Tai Luo's Excalibur appeared in his hands. The strength of these fictitious men is far beyond the corresponding realm. Don't look at these 3 snake-headed monsters are just top-level supreme, but they are far more terrible than ordinary top-level supreme. Even if it is Jian Wushuang, I dare not take it lightly. Cut. Just when Jian Wushuang lifted the Tai Luo Excalibur and was ready to fight with the 3 snakehead monsters, Rongzuan Supreme had already taken a step ahead, swiping his right foot fiercely, and will be facing the 3 snake heads bitten by Jian Wushuang. Fly together. Sword unparalleled, you are weak, not his opponent, give him to me. Zun Rongji glanced at Jian Wushuang, and then stared at the snake-headed weird with countless dignity. It is good. Wu Jian Wushuang nodded his head, without evading politeness. At this moment, it is extremely critical, not the time for him to fail. Hiss, are you in a hurry to come to death? The 3 snake-head monsters' mouth opened a playful smile, looking at Rongzhen Supreme, the cruel light in his eyes continued to spit. Tong Rongzhen is obviously higher than him, but he is not half afraid, but instead has the light of greed in his eyes. Whiteness, that kid is over to you. The 3-headed snake said to the young man with a pale face and black eyeshadows under his eyes. This person is the weakest one among the 8 books, and the one with the most human-like appearance. It is good. Baidu heard his words and tilted his head, and the whole person revealed his numbness and stiffness. Alas! Countless black light waves condensed in his hands and turned into a thin sword. Next moment, two imaginary forces exploded at the foot of Baidu, and he rushed out instantly, like a white lightning, fiercely chopped to the sword unparalleled. Can you still use it like this? Wu Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes, and the Tai Luo Excalibur was cut off instantly. Wu Tai Luo's Excalibur collided with the sword made by Xu Li, and suddenly the sword with Xu Li shattered. Nianjian Wushuang's neck twisted, and his right fist was slammed out, just like pushing a round of the sun. Numerous bright golden lights condensed on Jian Wushuang's right fist and banged heavily on Baidu's cheek. Boom! Instantly, the whiteness was hit by a smashing hammer, and the body flew upside down. The whole head was directly blasted by this fist. Shusha, but that's it. The sword has no double-sided and expressionless. This whiteness is 2 marks, which corresponds to the medium supreme strength, even if his strength is far superior to the medium supreme, to improve a grade, but only the high supreme. High supreme has long been no longer in the eyes of Jian Wushuang. Is it? Countless thick tentacles poured from Baidu's neck, and in a short time, he recovered as before. Oh! The speed of recovery is much faster than us. A slight surprise flashed in Wu Jianhua's eyes, and then an interested look appeared on his face. Come on, let me see, how powerful are your vagrants? Do not let me down. The sword Wushuang rose to the sky, a majestic sword pressure, centered on the sword, spread instantly. The battle between the two parties and horses has fallen into the most intense state from the beginning. Heiyuan Supreme and 11 Supreme shot at the same time, strangling headless monsters back and forth. The two invincible extremes join forces. It's not as simple as 1 + 1. Either of them has the terrifying power to level the universe and destroy one side. At the moment, when the two of them join forces, the entire starry sky is exploded, as if to reshape the universe and open up a chaotic whirl. I can't use any words to describe the power of both shot. In their hands, the sun and the moon are just of mud and that are free to play between their fingers, and the Milky Way across the sky, but the stream flowing under their feet. They can raise their hands and throw their feet at will, and can directly overturn the entire universe and blast its supernatural power. A little bit of mighty power is enough to squash countless stars. Although this headless monster is strong, it can even be said that he has repressive strength in the face of any of these two people, but in the joint effort of the two, he was suddenly beaten back and can only keep roaring. On the battlefield, horrible magical powers exploded, and sword blades tore through the sky. If someone in the depths of the universe saw this scene at this time, they would be exclaimed that this is a battle for extinction. With the joining of the 6th and 7th teams, the 8 generals that had been devastated and destroyed were immediately contained and the situation reverse. Among them, in addition to the headless monster, the one with the highest build is the monster with a fat body and a mouth split to the ears. The teeth in his mouth were uneven and long, but he opened his mouth and bit a bite, but he directly crushed a supreme soldier who pierced him. Ha 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 ha, explode. A horrifying purple light wave spewed out of his mouth like a thunderbolt, and the 5 supremes who besieged him were all driven away. These 8 books are really too powerful. Although each of them is faced with enemies that are several times their own, and is suppressed by death, they have not really fallen to the stage of life and death crisis, and they can even counterattack. I can say that if any of these 8 books are placed in the depths of the universe, they will be the masters of the hegemony. Cut star. A blue sword mang, nearly 10,000 square meters thick, condense in the sword without hands. The sword has no double sides and no expression, and it is easy to split. The entire sky was ripped apart by the mighty boom. Instantly the dummy named Baidu was severely split again. How can it be so strong? Tong Baidu's eyes shrank. This was the first time he had met. The opposite universe had a state under him, but he could crush him. His numb and stiff face was now full of fear. Boom. He picked up again, and countless virtual forces in his hand turned into a long sword. Under the flash of his body, he appeared on the top of Jian Wushuang's head and severely chopped off. Click. However, this sword was directly held by Wushuang's 5 fingers. Numerous violent virtual forces exploded between the 5 fingers of the sword pair, but they were unable to shake the sword pair. I heard that you have a companion supernatural power called virtual explosion. If you do use it again, you have no chance. Wu Jianshou shook his head and shook his finger, and the endless majestic strength immediately condensed at his fingertips, and instantly flew this whiteness. He looked down at the man condescendingly, his eyes indifferent. Okay, well, I'll do as you wish. Baidu struggled to stand up from the ground, holding his hands in a fierce space in front of him, and yelled in a low voice, "Virtual explosion." Chapter 4450. Second more. Boom tilde. Suddenly, this starry sky stagnates suddenly. Immediately, two long marks on the left shoulder of Baidu burst into countless red lights. Immediately, a stream of energy overflowed from him, forming a red ball of light between his palms. Alas! Around this crimson ball of light, as if the void was being squeezed by the giant force, and began to frantically shatter. I am so strange to the extreme, a breath that is completely different from the divine power permeates, representing destruction. Dead. The next moment, Baidu looked up sharply, looking at Xiong Wushuang, pushing his hands forward. Roar. In an instant, this crimson ball of light, like a bomb that destroyed the world, jumped across countless spaces and slammed straight towards the sword unparalleled. The power of this blow is more than hundreds of times the energy of this person before, even enough to threaten the half-step invincible supreme. Is this a virtual explosion? No wonder in the same realm, virtual scholars are much stronger than our monks. Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes, staring at the horrible red ball approaching him quickly, and his interest became strong. Immediately, Jian Wushuang did a move that was enough to make the audience crazy. He slowly reached out his hand and grabbed at this scary red ball. Warriors Supreme. The Rongji Supreme, who was fighting fiercely in the distance, noticed this scene, and suddenly changed his face, yelling, "Wushuang Supreme, quickly escape." The other 8 books will notice this scene. Firstly, it seems to be a little surprised that the whiteness is used to deal with a rude elementary supreme, and it is forced to use a virtual explosion, and then a sneer will appear on his face. Yang Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes as if he was oblivious, and continued to reach for the scary red ball. It was almost within a short time before Jian Wushuang's right hand touched this scary red ball. Boom! A violent and distorted power burst into the sword without hand. The outstretched arm of Wu Jianwushuang burst directly. Is this the power of imagination? Jian Jianhua's eyes shined out, feeling the power inside that terrible red ball. That is a very different power from the supreme divine power. On this horror ball, the entire arm of Jian Wushuang was smashed, and when it was about to be on the sword Wushan body, the two sides of the sword said, "Town." In an instant, Chaos Overlord was urged to the limit by Jian Wushuang, and the surface of the whole body's skin spewed a godlike pattern like a twisted tree root. At the position of his eyebrow, the purple word Chuan also instantly became demon-dazzled. Countless sword chi burst out on Jian Wushuang. Suddenly, the original terrible horror ball was destroyed, and it broke instantly. Numerous magical powers evolved on the arm that Jian Wushuang blew up, and turned into his arm again. Wu Jianshou looked at Baidu indifferently, and said, "This associated supernatural power is really strong, but unfortunately, you are too weak." After speaking, Tai Luo Di Jian reunited in the sword without hands. Wu Jian Wushuang is full of sharp breath like the magic sword with the same sheath. He could feel that the Taro Excalibur in his hand could not help but be ready to bleed. Well, let's go to death. The sword has no hands in the tailored Excalibur, splitting towards that whiteness. No. How could I die in the hands of your lowly humble universe monks? The whiteness screamed, but turned and rushed towards the void crack. Want to escape? Wu Jianshou sneered. Talented, amazing life. Boom. Instantly, a coercion from the highest level of life came to the audience. Under this coercion, the entire starry sky is stagnant, and space and time seem to freeze at this moment. The sound that Baidu was running away stopped in an instant. He turned his head and stared at Xiong Wushuang, as if he had found something that shocked him. His eyes enlarged sharply and he lost his voice. Your body, how could there be a breath of his life? The breath of his. He Jian Shuang heard the words, and couldn't help a frown, and the Tai Luo Excalibur, which had been split off, was taken back by him. He stepped in front of Baidu, looked down at him coldly and asked, "Who is the he you said? You don't know him?" Baidu heard a word, seems to be accidental sword Wushuang. "I do not know who he said this person," then laughed ha ha. "Ha ha ha ha, there is a his breath in your body, humble and poor guy, you are dead. They will come to you. What are you talking about?" Wu Jianshuang frowned. He could feel that the person in front of him did not open the river in the mouth. This person must know something. "You want to know?" At this moment, Baidu no longer had the fear of death, but there was a strangeness in his eyes. "Humble and poor guy, you have a relationship with he and you will die. No matter where you flee, those lunatics will find you and you will surely die." Huh. The voice dropped. Baidu's body exploded. At this moment, he even chose to blow himself up. The horrible might exploded, setting off a monstrous white wave. The sword Wushuang receding back, waved his hands again and again, and waved the shock wave formed by the whiteness self-explosion. "What the is this guy talking about?" Wu Jian Wushuang stood with his sword. His face was cloudy for a while. Shi Baidu's words before his death were like curses, echoing in his mind. Who is he? Who are those lunatics who are going to kill me? The meaning of Ji Jianhua's eyes blinking quickly. He was not a stupid person, and soon realized that Baidu would suddenly say so, after he released his talents and shocked his life. And Jian Wushuang was very keenly aware of it. The first sentence this person said revealed the word breath of life. A breath of life. Jian Wushuang murmured to himself, it can be said that his special life was all created by his master Xian Yi by his own power, so this person just said his master? Then the lunatic in his mouth, was he the one who hunted down master in Joey Starfield? In the faint ambiguity, Jian Wushuang seems to feel that in the endless darkness, there is an invisible line, which is controlling everything. The master of this line is his master Xuani. He can now be 100% certain that his mysterious master is absolutely inextricably related to the virtual universe. Even, Jian Wushuang felt more and more that every step that his master took was meant. He began to wonder if it was his first meeting with Xuani, which seemed to be an unintentional coincidence, but in fact it was already a planned plan. In addition, Jian Wushuang has another problem that he is most concerned about. Then, if his master is really in the next big game, what role will he play in this big game? Nothing. Now the most important thing is to improve our strength. After she took a deep breath, Jian Wushuang no longer thought about it, but turned his eyes and looked toward the battlefield. With Jian Wushuang ending the battle, other people's battles also came to an end. Chapter 44-51. Third more. On the battlefield. The 8 generals headed by a headless monster, under the pressure of the 6th and 7th teams, can only retreat steadily. The headless monster tried to escape several times, but was stopped by Supreme Heiyuan and Supreme Shi. One after another tearing the heavens and the earth through the sky, crossing the sun and the moon, suppressing all direction. Under the cooperation of Heiyuan Supreme and 1111 Supreme, the headless monster was gradually forced to the corner and had no choice. The waste of Baidu was actually killed. The headless monster noticed the scene where Jian Wushuang beheaded Baidu, and a loud humming sound came out of his nose. Then he looked at the 3-headed snake and said in a low voice, "Willow, before we retreat, you kill the guy with the sword." He was facing 3 snakes of the top siege of the 2 vice team level top sieges. He nodded and heard the words. The 3 snake heads opened their mouths at the same time. Immediately, he swept away and rushed to sword unparalleled. "Hiss, you can even kill Baidu, it seems that I look down on you." The turquoise pupil in the eyes of the 3-headed snake twisted, and a strange laugh was made in his mouth. Wu Jian Wushuang looked up at the man, his face slumped. On this person's left shoulder, 4 long scars are like scars of 3, reflecting the scarlet light. The strength of this 3-headed snake is far more powerful than that of whiteness. He was even stared at by the 3-headed snake, and he had a sense of horror that he had become a prey. The cold hair of the sword unparalleled body was all upright. "Eat you." Huh. The 3-headed snake turned his head and disappeared instantly. When it appeared again, he had already appeared above Jian Wushuang. The huge snake's mouth opened, and he bit it down. It's fast. Wu Jian's face changed slightly, and Tai Luo's Excalibur split instantly. A sword-like horror, making a terrifying howling sound, instantly split into the giant mouth bit by the three-headed snake. It was like a bomb exploded in the mouth of a three-headed snake. However, the three-headed snake was chopped by the swordman, but there was no pain at all. Instead, he bit a bite and swallowed the swordman directly. In the belly. No wonder you can cut and kill Baidu. Your sword is powerful and has reached the level of 3 marks. The three-headed snake Yin whispered a low laugh, and then Feng Feng said, if I'm not mistaken, you must be a Qianjiao character in this universe. Jian Wushuang heard nothing and said nothing, but the body full of supreme divine power, ready to go. Oh, you're so boring. When the three-headed snake saw Jian Wushuang ignored him, he couldn't help but churn his lips, and immediately the dark green pupils contracted into a line instantly, and endless virtual force burst out from here. Well, let me eat you. Boom tilde. The virtual force on the three-headed snake exploded again. Under the sweep of its body, it opened a mouth that was enough to swallow the sun, the moon, and the stars, and bite away fiercely towards Jian Wushuang. Taro Sword Code, Second Style, Dawn. Yang Jian Wushuang's voice chilled and turned directly into a golden light, quickly splitting towards the three-headed snake. With this sword, Feng Rui reached the extreme point, enough to cut off the galaxy and split Jushan. Boom tilde. The two severely hit each other, and the power of the Tai Luo divine sword exploded directly. Instantly, the snake head in the middle of the three-headed snake, from the mouth of the snake to the end of the snake, was flashed by a golden thread and cut in half. This time, the three-headed snake couldn't hold it anymore, and gave a painful growl. The figure of the unparalleled sword is condensed behind the three-headed snake. This sword splits the three-headed snake into 2 halves, but he is not proud of it, but his face is more dignified. Taro Sword Code, Third Style, Dusk. Boom. Instantly, Duan Zhenjiao was urged by Jian Wushuang. With Jian Wushuang as the center, a huge pit appeared at the foot of Jian Wushuang, and then spread and spread. There was a huge suction coming out from the center of the pit, and it was only a moment that he pulled the three-headed snake into it. Buried. The 5 fingers spread out by Wu Jian's unparalleled grip. Suddenly, a force of squeezing from the sky suddenly burst out from the pit. The force of squeezing and colliding was so magnificent that it was enough to crush a top-level supreme into a meat sauce instantly. At this moment, the three-headed snake that was still roaring suddenly had a look of fear on his face. Stuck in this pit, he was like an earthworm trapped in a huge stone mill. His body was crushed thousands of times in an instant. In the distance, the headless monster, who had been driven to an end, noticed this scene, and his face suddenly became ugly. For the first time, he looked at Jian Wushuang, his eyes surged. Heiyuan Supreme and 1111 Supreme also saw the pictures of Jian Wushuang suppressing the three-headed snake, and there was a flash of color in his eyes. Heiyuan, it seems you have a monster under your hand. Sushi Supreme smiled slightly. Under the cooperation of the two, the headless monster has come out, but now it is only the end of a strong crossbow, so he also rarely relaxes a bit. UCANT talk about evil spirits, but your talent is better than others, and you still need to experience it. Heiyuan Supreme has no emotional changes on his face, but in his heart he is also surprised by Jian Wushuang's combat power. Is it? Su Shishuan looked at Heiyuan Supreme with a smile, and then said, Heiyuan, why not transfer him to my 6th team? Get out of here. Heiyuan glanced at him without hesitation, and then snorted, don't say this, first kill this headless monster. Luxai Supreme nodded his head, and looked again at the headless monster, with a coldness on his face. A 6-mark monster, even if he guards thousands of chaos ages in this extraterrestrial battlefield, has only seen it a few times. This is a big fish, you must not let it go. Supernatural power, Sanqing in one gas. For a moment, the 3 figures exactly the same as those of the Supreme Master Xuanxi came out of his body. The other side. Virtual explosion. Three-headed snake delirium feeling the force of terror squeezing in the pit at dusk, no longer hesitating, arrogantly used the associated supernatural power, virtual explosion. Suddenly, the skulls on the left and right sides of the three-headed snake delirium exploded directly. After the two snake heads exploded, they turned into pure virtual energy and rushed towards the middle skull. Roar! The three-headed snake delirium opened his mouth, and a thick wave of light from the bucket was instantly roared by him. This horrible wave of light is so powerful that it only pierced the pit of dusk at once, and pulled out a long dark trace in the void. This horrible wave of light, after piercing the pit of the dusk, blasted towards Jian Wushuang again. Come! Wu Jianshou took a deep breath and clenched the tailored Excalibur in his hand. The war in his eyes turned into a spark, flashing to the extreme. Break me! Wu Jianshou roared, and his power was tens of thousands of times more powerful than the ordinary supreme power, all in his hands. Choose. Suddenly, Taro's sword turned into a world that cut the sky, cut the sun, the moon, the stars, and the terrible sword rainbow that runs through the sky and the sky. Beneath the sword, the tailored sword trembled wildly, making a sound like the Buddha groaned, and the demon wept. Boom! Suddenly, the sword was chopped on the false burst of delusive light. Chapter 44-52. Forthmore. Boom! Instantaneously, two huge shock waves spread rapidly in the center of the two men's fighting. The whole void bursts instantly. Even the other Supremes who met in the distance were smashed by those who were hit by this shockwave, and they retreated back. For a moment, Tai Luo's magic sword turned into a dragon sword rainbow, stalemate with this strange light wave, regardless of up and down. Roar! Delirious Willow opened his mouth and yelled again, and saw the strange light wave in his mouth, and it turned out that the power had skyrocketed again, from the thick of the bucket to the thickness that required two people to embrace. Instantly, Jian Wushuang was severely rushed to fly, and the white robe representing the seventh team burst directly. Shusha is really strong. Jian Wushuang stepped back all the way, stepped on the void with his legs, and crossed two long marks. He couldn't help breathing a little. This delusion is a four-marked false soldier, which means that it corresponds to the top supreme in the universe, but it can be said to be powerful, and it is even more terrifying than the half-step invincible supreme Yuding who has passed the enemy. The pit was broken inch by inch at dusk, and Willow stepped out step by step, his eyes flashed to the extreme. Best and weakest trash, bug. You have angered me completely. You it. Delirious Willow finished speaking, and suddenly there was a surge of madness on his face, and he wanted to violently slash Swordsman. However, just then, in the distance, there was a roaring roar of a headless monster. I saw Heiyuan Supreme standing on the sky, and an invincible supreme power broke out, and said coldly, "Supernatural power, black prison half-moon cut." Boom! In a split second, the huge black knife in his hand rose in the wind, and in a short period of time, it skyrocketed to a full length, turned into a thunder-black dragon with open teeth and claws, opened his teeth, and split directly on the left shoulder of the headless monster. Tear it! This headless monster was torn open with a single knife, dropping countless blood. And Supreme followed closely behind. The movement is not slow at all. Also use the killer supernatural powers, 5 spirit. Boom! Instantaneous visions, countless meteors condensed out of thin air, and then fell like rain. The two killed together. After a round of blows, the headless monster suddenly exploded and turned into countless pieces of minced meat. I have to say that the virtual monks from this virtual universe are powerful. If they are ordinary monks, even if they are invincible supremes, they will face 2 rounds of devastating blows from Supreme Heiyuan and Supreme Streams. I saw that the tentacles were breeding wildly on the numerous pieces of minced meat floating in the void. After a short breath, these tentacles came together and turned into a headless monster. Puffing his breath was weakened a lot, and the face on the chest was staring at Heiyuan Supreme and Shioxi Supreme. Ha ha! He. He gave a low, weird grin in his mouth and immediately said, "You can't kill me. Is it?" Heiyuan Supreme and Jashi Supreme are expressionless, walking towards the headless monster step by step. There was a mocking smile on the corner of the mouthless monster. Immediately, an extremely powerful coercion emanated from the headless monster. This coercion does not belong to him. At the moment when this coercion is released, The looks of Heiyuan Supreme and 1111 Supreme are all change. This coercive force is far above them. This coercion, they are very familiar. At the same time, when the headless monster closed his eyes, his face became devout and whispered, "Great God, I am your people God." The magical groaning whispered from his mouth. The three-headed snake delirium that was originally crumbling and killed towards Jian Wushuang, after giving up on Jian Wushuang unwillingly, gave up the pursuit of Jian Wushuang, stopped his pace, and began to silently groan like a headless giant recite, "Great God, am your people, Willow." At the same time, Yabu will be among the others, the spherical monster with a mouth cracked to the jaw, and a horned warrior with thick fangs. 28 generals began to recite this magic spell. Suddenly, a terrifying breath came from them. In this breath, whether it is invincible supremacy such as Heiyuan and Xuanxi, or sword unparalleled, it is like falling in an ice cellar. A big terror between life and death is enough to suffocate. Huh. There was a dull sound, from the crack in the void. Howling. Immediately after that, a squeak of iron chains across the floor sounded. What happened? Sui Jian Wushuang suddenly felt an extremely strong palpitation, coming from the body's instinct, and wanted him to flee this place immediately. As if an indescribable terror exists, it is coming to the world soon. Huh. The muffled sound grew louder and louder, as if Lei Gong was angry, and slammed the smashing hammer in his hand. Boom. Suddenly, the void crack exploded. I was bound by countless chains, and the extremely dark arm was so large that it burst out from the void crack. Can't use any voice to describe this dark arm, which is so big that it completely subverts the sword's unparalleled imagination. Light is a fingernail, which is dozens of times of the sun. With the palm of your hand, you can cover several star field. There was a vast, evil, ancient atmosphere, and it erupted, turning into a cloud of smoke. Guang is an arm that is so huge, it is hard to imagine how big the master of this arm will be. Suddenly, Heiyuan Supreme and Xuanxi Supreme were horrified, and a horror surged in their eyes. Qi Jian Wushuang almost fell directly from the air, and the whole person was like a falling ice cellar with cold liver and gallbladder. This is definitely one of the most terrifying beings he has ever encountered. This is the arm that had dealt with Master Zeus. In the distance, the 8th captain, Zero Wood Supreme, who was recovering quickly, was directly interrupted, shocked, and lost his voice. Boom. The next moment, the arm was raised high, and it was photographed fiercely towards Jian Wushuang and others. Escape. He did not hesitate at all, whether it was Heiyuan Supreme or others, or Jian Wushuang. All the divine power in the body erupted in an instant, turned into countless rays of light, and blasted away in all directions. However, some people's response was slow. Two high-ranking Supreme, only then erected light and grabbed, that palm has been photographed fiercely. Millions of empties, shattered at the same time. Hundreds of thousands of mushroom clouds rose from his fingers. Do not. The two Supreme Masters, who had only had the time to utter a roar of anger, were directly photographed as a fan powder, and they were destroyed. Boom tilde. Immediately, the arm was raised again, and the 5 fingers as thick as the Milky Way, took a hard shot toward the front. With this palm, this time directly wrapped the sword Wushuang etc. in it. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang's face turned wild. Chapter 44-53. Fifth More, at the same time. Located in the base camp and main hall of the extraterritorial battlefield. Wu Ju Shenjiao sat on the main seat, closed his eyes and meditated. Tong Lansu and Lan Lan disciples stood beside him, silent. Suddenly, the statue of Ju felt something, and opened his eyes suddenly. Shu Shen was born. He raised his head, staring at the cracks in the void. His eyes stared directly through the starry sky, and he saw the huge black arm. Hearing this, Lan Su and Lan Lan, 2 disciples standing on his sides, suddenly felt a horror on his face. Xian Shu Shen, but those who have dealt with Master, Xiao Su, Xiao Lan, keep your base camp. Wu Jushen's face was heavy, only to see his shoulder tremble slightly, then he disappeared into the main hall. After the god of the gods left, Lan Su and Lan Lan couldn't help looking at each other, and their hearts began to sink. Extraterrestrial battlefield. Rumble tilde. The entire starry sky has been blown up. Headless Monsters and His Majesty's 8-part will stand in place, watching this scene steadily, with sparks of excitement in their eyes. The second palm photographed by that black arm is already coming. Instantaneously, the tidal wave is surging, and countless chi machines are shaking. The world seems to be in the end, and it will be destroyed once. I was swiftly firing the sword Wushuang who fled. I only felt that the eyes were black, and when I looked up, I saw that the wide palm had covered the sky and replaced the vast sky. Do not. Instantly, Jian Wushuang was about to crack, an unprecedented crisis of life and death, constantly exploding in his body, like an alarm bell. Let him leave quickly. Taro sword appeared in the sword without hands in an instant. At this moment, Jian Wushuang has no reservations anymore, and all the divine power on his body bursts out. Instantly, the sword Wushuang directly split into thousands of swords in white, resisting this palm. However, it is useless, everything is useless. This way of destruction is enough to cut off the mighty swordsmanship of the universe, and falling on this palm is like being bitten by a mosquito, which can't hinder the slightest. Fortunately, Jian Wushuang did not intend to stop the sword, but took advantage of the impact of this sword to split, and quickly retreated, leaving the attack area of this palm. Tyro Sword Code 5th Style Taro. Under the pressure of this crisis of life and death, Jian Wushuang has been completely insane, and utterly used the best of the best in the bottom of the box. Boom tilde. Suddenly, behind the sword Wushuang, there appeared to be the supreme faith of Tai Luo Supreme. This law is as big as a star, but in front of the arm, it is as small as a finger, extremely small. Cut. Qi Jian Wushuang exhausted his whole body energy. Suddenly, he was holding the Tai Luo divine sword, and he slashed down with a sword. His back was also in the same shape, making the same action as the sword unparalleled. The majestic sword surged up into the sky. This defeated half-step invincible supreme ice sword's Tai Luo sword was just a blink of an eye, and it was severely chopped on the palm of an inch of pressure. Buzz tilde. Wu Tailuo's sword exploded directly on the dark palm, forming a star-shaped mushroom cloud. However, this palm still stood still and fell quickly. Qi Jian's unparalleled vision turned into a darkness, and the whole world was filled with this palm. Fortunately, the airwaves that Taro sword exploded directly formed a terrifying shock wave and spreading Jian Wushuang, which was already extremely fast, to the front again. Boom tilde. Finally, this palm fell down. At this critical moment, Jian Wushuang arrogantly used all the mysteries that can be improved in a short time, bringing the speed to an extreme and rising to a level again. It was embarrassing. At the moment when the palm fell, Jian Wushuang burst into a roar, and a roll rolled away from the palm. The fingertips of the arm fell from the place where the sword was unparalleled but at a distance of 100 feet. The Ju Xing Shengzi is also included in this palm, and there are no more than one position behind the sword. He is out of luck. The desperate roar came to an abrupt halt and he was photographed as a fan. Allied. At the last moment of his death, his eyes turned to Jian Wushuang. His eyes were full of fear and thirst, as if he wanted Jian Wushuang to save him. 9 stars. Jian sword Wushuang was smashing instantly. Ju Xing Shengzi is the core member of the Sword Alliance and one of the highest followers in the ancient sky. However, he hasn't waited for Jian Wushuang to take any action. With the torrential weather falling from that palm, a shock wave has formed, sending him to fly fiercely. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang was like a broken sack. He crossed a long parabola in the air and fell into the distance. Qi Jian Wushuang struggled to stand up from the ground, and the blood couldn't be restrained, and he spit out of his mouth. Qi Jian Wushuang looked at the drop of that palm, his face gloomy to the extreme. Rub. Suddenly, that palm has been raised again. Under the palm of his hand, nearly 10 supreme people have turned into dust and fell completely. This palm, like a devil, slowly lifted up, and the dark and strong magic air between the 5 fingers entangled. The third palm is coming. Hold this palm, and completely cover everyone. Wu Heiyuan Supreme and others looked at this palm, and could not help but feel scalp tingling. More people feel ashamed and give up resistance completely. Wu Jianhuang's face was somber that he could drip water, and that Tai Luo sword had completely drained all the divine power from him. Now, let alone escape from the attack range of this palm, even if it is now possible to give another sword, it is not easy. In the distance, headless monsters and 8 generals, looking at this scene, a grim and cruel smile suddenly appeared on his face. Great Lord, end this life of garbage. Boom tilde. The path was bound by a black iron chain, and the skin was dark and dry, like a corpse's huge arm, raised again, and took a third palm. Everyone gave up. In addition to Sword Wu Shuang. No. I won't die here. Never. Yang Jian Wushuang's teeth clattered. There was a sense of insanity in his eyes. He saw his right hand flip, and Wu Xing Chao Ding Ding appeared in his hand. Hit him, it's time to detonate Wu Ding Chao Ding. He wants to directly control Wu Xing's Chaos Ding to explode to stop this hand. All this is too crazy, too shocking. No one can imagine what effect the self-detonation of an extreme ancestor will have. His Wu Jianshou took a deep breath and looked at the trembling Wu Ding Chao Ding in his hands. His eyes flashed intolerable first. But after a short while, this one can't bear it, and it has been replaced by madness and determination. Rumble tilde. This palm is getting closer and closer. I cover the sky and the sun is magnificent. The huge wind, blowing Jian Wushuang's black hair flying, and the pressure from the giant palm that has not fallen, has caused Jian Kaoshuang's chaotic domineering body to crack open fiercely, and there is a spider web crack. It's time. Jian Wushuang is about to detonate the Wu Ding Chao Ding. Presumptuous. As the King of Chaos speaks, an old voice, as if through the floods of the universe, experienced the ancient yellow, and exploded in the starry sky. Chapter 44-54. The first is more. After this sound blew, all the people raised their heads instantly and heard the sound. I saw one approaching to the extreme, using the white horses captured by both eyes to pass in front of them in an instant. Everyone just felt that a flower was in front of them, and this practice appeared above their heads. That is an old man with white hair. Behind him, blossoming lotus blossoms. Master Elder God, Master Zeus is here. We are saved. For a moment, there was a rush of ecstasy on everyone's face. That was the ecstasy of the rest of the life after the disaster. Wu Jian's pupils shrank, and he would prepare for the self-destructive Wu Ding Chao Ding, and withdrew it from the ring. Buzz buzz. After I saw the god of Era, there was a burst of violent sounds in the void crack. Shushan, you are over the line. Wu Ju god was expressionless, stretched out his fingers, and pointed toward the palm that destroyed the heavens and the earth. This finger is very common. Even if Jian Wushuang's luck was concentrated in his eyes, he didn't see anything special about this finger. However, it is this finger that gently touches the palm of the black palm, but it is the giant palm that is crushed all the way, and it can no longer be in the slightest. A cold voice sounded from the mouth of Ju God. Next moment, boom. Instantly, countless bright brilliance burst out, and the avenue directly evolved into substance, turning into a rolling fairy wheel. At this fingertip position, there are 6 reincarnations rising, fairy birds flying, cranes hovering, true dragon and phoenix arrogant. Suddenly, endless Yanhui fell, countless stars flew around, the avenue sometimes turned into a huge yin and yang gossip, and sometimes turned into a flowing billowing huangquan, as if the heavens and earth were condensed in this finger. Roar. A loud, snarling roar spread through the cracks in the void from the other side. Immediately afterwards, I saw that this palm was like an electric shock and began to retract at a very fast speed. Instantly, the 8 generals headed by a headless monster were directly exploded into countless pieces of flesh by the aftershock force of this finger. Holding the huge arm, he grabbed it fiercely, and grabbed the 8 pieces of minced meat in his hand, and crazily retracted into the void crack. Alas! After a few breaths, the pile of minced meat condensed together and turned into a headless monster and 8 generals. Damn! We will be back. Hiss, that guy with the sword, this time you are lucky, next time you will not be so lucky. The headless monster and the 8 generals were exhausted to the extreme, but even so, their faces were not half afraid, but they looked provocatively at the of the earth. The three snakes' delirious willows looked cruelly toward Xiong Wushuang, pulling a sneer from the corner of his mouth. Howl Tilda. He was just dying, and the black arm, wrapped in a headless monster and 8 generals, retracted into the void crack. Everyone looked at each other, and in their hearts, they had the good fortune of the rest of their lives, but more, it was still a strong humiliation. Want to come? Just leave. I have always had a mild expression of the universe. This time there is no trace of expression on his face, cold like a piece of ice. I saw his body flicker, and the whole person disappeared again, but he just stepped into the void crack. Master Elder God. Instantly, countless people's hearts tightened. No one expected that the universe would rush into the void crack. Don't worry, since the Lord God of God dared to face the universe, he will certainly come back. He Yuan's supreme glanced at the crowd, and he said with a deep voice. Sushi Supreme also took a deep breath and said slowly, the owner of that arm just now is the strongest of the virtual universe. Since he dared to cross the line to slaughter us, the Lord God can naturally kill them in the past. Everyone be calm and calm, just wait quietly. Everyone heard the words, looked at each other, and nodded, and stopped talking. To tell the truth, the battle with the 8 generals was almost overwhelming. However, the emergence of that huge arm was an instant reversal of the situation and massacre. It was like a fight between 2 children, but the adults suddenly stepped in. In the hearts of all the people, all those who surged were trembling, a layer of haze. Fortunately, the universe came. Howling. Inside the fissure of the void, there was a loud explosion. After dying for about half a column of incense, the universe rushed out of it. He held in his hands, carrying the headless monster and 8 generals. His face is slightly pale, the compatibility between the 2 universes is too large, the higher the revision, the stronger this compatibility, and the more he will be rejected by different universes. Even if he is able to stay in the virtual universe for too long, he can only withdraw. Master Elder God is back. Master, God, are you okay? Everyone started talking and hurried forward. Old man is fine. The god of Shakespeare shook his head, and immediately looked at the headless monster and Hashiman, who were sealed by mystics. In the hands of the gods, the headless monsters and 8 generals, which were extremely difficult to deal with before, are just as weak as a baby. Close. As soon as the Phoenix god's eyes were cold, he directly displayed the great magical power, and squeezed these 8 parts and headless monsters into a bead-sized bead. You want to leave if you kill someone? Will my husband allow it? Wu Jushan shook his head, looked at Supreme He Yuan and others, and said, the 6th team stays behind the void in the void, and the others go back with the old man. Everyone looked at the 8 generals and the headless monsters that were captured by the gods of Ju. They felt that they were exhaling a sigh of anger, and they came to the extreme. Yes. So everyone should be rushing. Tilda. Under the leadership of the universe, everyone turned into a streamer, looting towards the base camp. Qi Jian Wushuang didn't have any expression on his face, but he felt like he was holding a heavy stone, which was extremely heavy. The brutality of the battlefield outside the territory was far beyond his imagination. You have to know that in the depths of the universe, Supreme can be a repressive party, commanding the utmost power of several stars, and there is almost nothing that can threaten Supreme life. But in this extraterrestrial battlefield, the Supreme is almost like a mustard, and will fall down if he is not careful. In the war just now, the number of the 6th, 7th, and 8th teams has fallen to the extreme, far exceeding the number of hands. Snapped. Hold a big hand and put it on the shoulder of Jian Wushuang. Qi Jian Wushuang looked up, He Yuan Supreme looked at him. Well, this is your first battle in the extraterrestrial battlefield. Take it easy. The extreme fall here is too sparse. But even me, maybe it will fall someday. Big hand patted on the shoulder. Wu He Yuan Supreme smiled slightly, and then Feng Feng said, you are doing well this time, go back. Okay. Wu Jianshou took a deep breath, stepped on his feet, turned into a sword-like sword, and drove quickly to the base camp. Chapter 44-55. Second more. Alas. I walked around Changhong, sweeping through the vast sky. Along the way, everyone didn't speak and remained silent. This victory was won, but the victory was too tragic and too tragic. Ji Jian has no expression on both sides, and is also silent, and the desperate look of Zhouxing Shengzi before his death is constantly replayed in his mind. He and Zhouxing Shengzi are not particularly familiar with each other, but it was only that time that the 6 major forces besieged the Temple of Life. Zhouxing Shengzi brought the disciples of Zhouxing Holy Land to support him, and he could remember it forever. Virtual God. Wu Jian murmured to himself, and then there was a flash of murder in his eyes. After a while, the base camp stationed outside the battlefield outside the territory arrived. In addition to the 6th team, who is now left to patrol the Void Fissures, the captain-level figures of the 8 teams are all members of His Majesty, standing at the gate of the base camp to welcome everyone. Obviously, they already knew the battle that broke out in the extraterritorial battlefield. This is also the first time that Zhen Wushuang saw members of the 9 team. Everyone walked into the base camp step by step and nodded slightly to the 8 team members, saying hello. Wu Jianwusu walked at the end. Just as he was about to step into the base camp, his steps were Emil. It's him. Wu Jianshou frowned and looked towards the 2nd team. The captain of the 2nd team is the Taishu Emperor who once had a relationship with him in the Taishu Temple. Unexpectedly, he turned out to be the captain of the 2nd team in this extraterrestrial battlefield. Oh, this guy is here too. Emperor Taishu also saw Zhen Wushuang and raised his brow slightly. Every once in a while, the God of Chaos will send a group of Supreme Masters to the extraterritorial battlefield in the universe. If he hadn't seen Zhen Wushuang today, he really didn't know that Zhen Wushuang came to the extraterritorial battlefield. Beside Emperor Taishu, Emperor Bingyang had already recovered from his injuries and put on a white robe of the rank of vice captain. He also saw the sword unparalleled, and he was shocked. Zhen Wushuang. This is Zhen Wushuang. Immediately, he lowered his head and opened a hysterical smile on the corner of his mouth. Very good. Zhen Wushuang, I didn't expect you to come to the extraterritorial battlefield. Ha 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 ha, it is time for us to settle account. His chest was violently undulating, his mouth was laughing, but there was no sound. The sword of Wu Jian glanced over Bingyu Supreme's face, and the corner of his mouth also pulled a sneer. I am very good. My enemies are in this extraterrestrial battlefield. The hatred between them has already reached the point of endlessness. Unless there is a fall between them, the hatred will continue. Snapped. Wu Jianwu stepped up and continued to move forward. Sword unparalleled, you are so fateful, the gods have survived. A harsh sound rang out in Zhen Wushuang's ears alone. Zhen Wushuang turned his head and saw Long Qing, wearing the white robe of the 3rd team vice-captain, spreading his hands, and said with a joke. After waiting for Sword Wushuang to reply, Long Qing shook her head and smiled, but that's fine, it seems that God's will is ready to let you die in my hands. Is it? Wu Jianwushuang glanced at him, then ignored him and walked forward step by step. For a long time, these enemies will naturally be solved one by one. I walked into the main hall. The phantom god has been sitting high on the main seat, holding in his hands a headless monster and 8 beads that will be condensed. His gaze swept across the faces of everyone, then he swung his right hand, a touch of warm brilliance, immediately waved out from the god of Ju, and spilled on everyone. Suddenly, there were many injured people on the original. The injuries recovered quickly, and the exhausted divine power accelerated the recovery speed. Ill wait, Shezhou god. Suddenly, everyone arched their hands. It doesn't matter. Wu Jushan nodded and said, this time you worked hard. Immediately, the right hand of God of the Emperor waved again, and the beads in his hand rose to the sky, freeing him from the palm of his hand. Howl. The next moment, the headless monsters and 8 generals rose in the wind and stood in the hall. Damn old thing. Kill. Suddenly, the headless monster and Babu screamed fiercely on their faces, and they shouted and killed. But now, what kind of waves do they find when the of the universe is here? Alas! I saw the expression of Ju God indifferent, a bounce of his fingers, and suddenly Dao Xianhui shot from his hand, turning into a cage, trapping the headless monster and Babe. In the cage, The headless monster slammed a few times and found that it was impossible to shake the cage at all. Then he turned his head to look at the Jew, put out his tongue and licked his lips, smiling. God of God, you just keep us till now, just want to know the news of Lord Shushan? Wu Ju God heard nothing and said nothing. The headless monster shook his head and said, what about what I tell you? It won't be long before Master Shushan will unlock the seal and lead the army to level the universe. By then, not only will you die, everyone in the entire hall can't escape. The billions of souls in your entire universe will become our slaves. Ha 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 ha. With that said, the headless monster laughed loudly, and his face was full of madness. Look for death. Wu Ju's face turned fierce, and he popped up with one finger, and the headless monster suddenly melted away from the body. In just a few breaths, it disappeared. Next, the of the universe shook his fingers, and Babu began to die one by one. In front of the universe, there is no difference whether it is the headless monster or the 8 generals. Just like Jian Wushuang and others face the dark arm, there is no resistance at all force. There was a muffled sound, and soon, the 8 books were exhausted, leaving only the gloomy 3-headed snake Delirium. Just as the of the universe was about to kill him, the 3-headed snake Delirious Liu suddenly said, I can tell you about the false god, and even tell our universe to deploy to you, but I have a condition. The god of Wu Ju frowned, and said lightly, what conditions? When he heard this, a cruel smile appeared on the corner of the mouth of the 3-headed snake Delirium, and the turquoise pupil turned. The next moment, his eyes fell on Jian Wushuang. I will fight this man, regardless of life or death, each depends on his fate. As soon as he said this, the audience was shocked. Alas! Everyone's eyes are on Jian Wushuang. Wu Jushan glanced at Jian Wushuang, and immediately relooked at the 3-headed snake delusion, shook his head and said, no, you have to change a condition. However, the 3-headed snake Willow shrugged and shook his head, that's a shame. Come on, kill me. You won't be me. After hearing the cold snoring, the god of Chaoju hurled around his fingertips and killed him. At this time. Fight me. I should. Wu Jian stepped out step by step without expression. Chapter 44-56. Third more. This battle, I answer it. When the sword Wushuang stepped out, the audience was silent after saying this sentence. Everyone is. Master, absolutely must. Jian Wushuang is my universe's arrogance. If anything goes wrong, it will be a great loss to my universe. Heiyuan Supreme also flashed his eyes and said, this is not possible. Jian Wushuang is not the elementary supreme practice, and the 3-headed snake has 4 mark-level virtual men. According to the realm swap, this is the top supreme, plus a false explosion is enough to compare to the invincible supreme. Everyone persuaded. At this moment, a seemingly strange sound sounded in the hall. What's so bad? Once we know the deployment of the void universe, we can deal with it in advance, and even wait for the rabbits to wipe them out. This matter is very important. What's the matter for Jian Wushuang to go to the war? In my opinion, don't just say let Jian Wushuang fight a battle. Even if Jian Wushuang took the initiative to die, it would be due to the universe, it's his duty. The speaker is not someone else. It is the Daewu Temple Supreme who joined the 6th team. Alas! Suddenly, many eyes fell on him. The deputy captain of the 7th team, Rongjing, sneered, you are so nice, why don't you go to death? Also, what is your duty? As far as I know, Jian Wushuang has come to this point. It's all on his own, and who hasn't owed half of it? How can he say it? Suddenly, the Supreme Nana from the Daewu Temple opened his mouth and thought for a long time before sulking, this 3-headed snake Willow is not me by name. When everyone heard the words, they couldn't help laughing, and when they wanted to say more, they saw the Jew shook his head and said, okay, be quiet. Then everyone shut up. Wu Jushan looked at Jian Wushuang, and Shensheng asked, little guy, if you are against him, how sure are you to win? Wu Jianshuang heard the words and smiled, then stretched out his hand, grabbed into the void, determinedly, 10%. It is good. After hearing the words, the God of Gods suddenly flashed in his eyes and nodded, the sword is unparalleled, and the old man will let you fight on behalf of our universe. Others still wanted to talk, but when they saw that the of the universe had already made a decision, Zhen Wushuang also looked like a vow, so he nodded and stopped saying more. It was the delusion who heard the words, and the corners of his mouth widened suddenly, pulling out a cold smile. Oh, I seem to be underestimated. Alas. The bifurcated pointed tongue licked the corner of his mouth, and the pupils of the willow dark green burst up, showing a trace of cruelty. Well, my husband will arrange a battlefield for you. The god of the phantoms tears at will, and immediately tears a crack in the void, turning it into a kingdom of gods. There are everything in the sky, the mountains, the lakes and the rivers. This ability to break new ground and create the world is truly amazing. Immediately, Jew God took a photo with his right hand, grabbed Willow from the air, and threw it into the battlefield of the kingdom of God. Thank God. Wu Jian Wushuang arched his hand at him, and then stepped into a streamer, and also shot into the battlefield of the kingdom of God. On the great hall, the silhouettes of Zhen Wushuang and Delirium disappeared. Instead, a landscape picture appeared. In the picture were the two swordsmen and Delirious in the battlefield of the kingdom of God. Look at it, since Zhen Wushuang said that he was 10% sure, he wouldn't be wrong. The of the universe faintly spoke. Everyone responded in congratulations, raised their heads and looked diligently at this picture. God Kingdom Battlefield. Wu Jian Wushuang and Liu Liu stood on a large lake and stood with their hands. The two did not have more nonsense, and they started the fight directly. With his right foot stepped, Zhen Wu overturned all the lakes, forming a giant wave surging, and the wave reached 100 feet high. Suddenly, in the tide, Zhen Wushuang has already held the Taro Excalibur in his hand, turning it into a forest blue sword, and rushing out. Howl! The waves of Baizhong broke open instantly, and the figure of Zhen Wushuang appeared above the head of Willow. Cut! The cold voice exploded. Qi Zhen Wushuang directly spurred the divine power and fell down severely. Hiss! Delirious Willow spit out snakes, and the green pupils reflected the appearance of Zhen Wushuang, a sword flying, and opened a red light wave. Instantly, this red light wave hit the tailored Excalibur that fell down and chopped off, and immediately sent out an extremely powerful shock wave. Instantaneously, the shock wave spread out and razed the square to the ground. The tens of millions of tons of water in the flooded lake are directly dried and evaporated, turning into water vapor, forming a monstrous white wave. Fortunately, this side of the kingdom of God was developed by the of the universe, and the space is extremely stable. Otherwise, if it is placed outside, it will be enough to smash the void and burst several planets. Boom! Both were retreats, and Willow was smashed into the ground hundreds of pieces, and a huge human-shaped pit appeared, while Zhen Wushuang flew backwards, crashing into 3 mountain peaks in succession. Khan stopped. This move was just a small tentative test of the two, so the two did not suffer any injuries. Breaking dawn. Yang Jianwushu leaned against the mountain wall, stepped on his right foot again, and his body radiated again, turning into a golden light, and killing towards Willow. Virtual crack. Delirious Willow's 3 snake heads were glued together, raised his hands, and slammed his sword towards Wushuang. Suddenly, 2 halos appeared in his hands, which actually caught the breaking dawn golden light. Ding 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 ding. Huge impulse, pushing Willow back hard and violently back. His feet marked 2 deep grooves on the ground in his hands, countless sparks splashed. Go to hell. Delirious Liu Yang laughed, the 3 snakes' heads opened, and they bit the sword's head. Yes, it is you. Yang Jianwa's eyes were cold, and he directly urged Chaos Overlord, sweeping his right foot fiercely, sweeping like a 9-section whip, and hit the snake head under the biting Willow. The snake head of Delirious Willow suddenly swayed, and Zhen Wushuang took the opportunity to yank out the Tai Luo Excalibur, and one sword flew Delirious Willow coldly, the 4th season of the Tara Sword Classic. Howl! Suddenly, the entire battlefield of the Kingdom of God was twisted, and the Taro sword disappeared. Click the whole world of the Kingdom of God, whether it be mountains, rivers or lakes, it freezes and freezes every inch of an inch, the temperature suddenly drops by dozens of degrees, and countless cold snow falls from the air. At a glance, the whole world was snow-capped, like a white harder covered with ice, and fell into the world of Glacier. Okay. Delirious Willow looked up at the sky and snow, and he couldn't help but stiffen. Alas! A gust of snow fell on his shoulder. Suddenly, the horrific ice-cold power directly passed through his body and instantly frozen his entire shoulder. Chapter 44-57. It is good. In the main hall of the base camp of the universe, everyone looked at the battle scenes coming from the screen, and clapped their hand. No wonder there was news from the universe before, saying that Zhen Wushuang is the first day of eternal arrogance, and has the ability to fight beyond the ranks. This seat will still be doubtful before. Now, it seems that the rumors are half exaggerated. Oh, remember that this trick was created by Taro's guy that year? Seeing Zhen Wushuang, he has already done Taro Supreme true story. He will probably be better than Blue out of Blue, surpass Taro Supreme, and take it away. The name of the first Sword Emperor of all ages. Since Supreme, I haven't seen such a profound person in Kendo in the universe for a long time. I really miss it. After this sun, the future is limitless. In my opinion, I'm afraid it won't take long. The Taro Excalibur will be renamed and replaced by the Wushuang Excalibur. Everyone said with a smile. They were quite worried at the beginning, but at the moment when they saw Zhen Wushuang, who could perfectly suppress the willow, they felt relieved. Only He Yuan is supreme, frowning slightly. I don't know why, there is always a bad feeling in his heart. God Kingdom Battlefield. Wu Zhen's unparalleled footwork is empty, his black hair is flying, and he looks down at the icy willow frozen in ice and snow, and speaks coldly, burning. Suddenly, the body of the three-headed snake Delirium directly exploded and shattered into numerous ice foam. The Zhen Wushuang saw a slight sigh of relief, and he could feel that the genchi mixed in the snow had completely crushed the willow into dregs. Hiss. However, just then, howl. Numerous tentacles poured out, tangled fiercely, and turned into the appearance of a three-headed snake. His breath is not diminished, looking up at Zhen Wushuang's eyes, full of irony. Okay. Zhen Wushuang raised his eyebrows, and even if he was, he had to say that the recovery ability of this virtual man was simply terror, and he could not help moving. Shu took a deep breath, and Zhen Wushuang sneered, I see you can survive a few blows. 4 seasons, winter to spring, boom tilde. Suddenly, the snow and snow disappeared, and all the spring thunder blew. The drizzle drizzled, rolling down, like playing a robbery fairy song. Millions of raindrops are millions of swords. Slaughter. Fall. Qi Zhen Wushuang said coldly. In an instant, millions of sword qi turned into raindrops, rolling down at the same time. Every sword qi is the full blow of Zhen Wushuang. Zheng Jin's move killed the Yuding Supreme and the thousands of avatars of the Supreme. Rumble tilde. Suddenly, the three-headed snake Willow just had to fire a few virtual bullets, and his body was again destroyed by millions of swords, and his body was broken. In the main hall, everyone looked at this scene again and again applauded. However, this time it was not only He Yuan Supreme's brow that frowned, but even the of heaven flashed a light in his eyes. God Kingdom Battlefield. No. There is a problem. Wu Zhenshou stopped moving, his brows tightened tightly together. If something goes wrong, there must be a demon. He played against the three-headed snake Willow in the extraterritorial battlefield. He knows the strength of Willow, and he is definitely not so weak. Until now, Willow had not performed the magical power burst at the bottom of the box. This guy must be thinking about it. Qi Zhen has no two-way talents, but just in an instant, he wants to understand everything. Why would Liu Liu find him solo, and why he hasn't performed his tricks? This only proves one problem. That's the delusion that Liu Liu is carrying. Well, let me see, what the are you doing? Wu Zhenshou snorted coldly, a flash of color flashed in his eyes. 4 seasons, spring to summer. Rumble tilde. Suddenly, the raindrops disappeared in the sky, a scorching sun, rising suddenly, hanging high for 9 days. Xia of the 4 seasons swordsmanship is the most violent and most terrifying move in the 4 seasons. Qi Zhen Wushuang did not believe it, and Liu Liu dared to cope with ease as before. Go with. The next moment, Zhen Wushuang waved his right hand heavily, and this round of fiercely hot sun, he immediately crushed towards the willow. Rumble. The entire battlefield of the kingdom of God shook madly, the earth began to dry and split, and dozens of gully marks appeared in the sky. The sky is falling apart. This time, the willow has finally changed color. The pupil in his eyes contracted violently, and a dip in his face surged, and said, "Void explode." Suddenly, the left and right heads of willow were blown away severely, thousands of energy were accumulated in his mouth, and a terrifying light wave was born. Roar. The next moment, this light wave radiated out, and collided with the big sun that fell heavily. Let's sizzle. The void is twisted for a while. Even if you see, the extremely stable space of the kingdom battlefield opened by the god of Ju himself is beginning to be full of dense cracks like spider web. Countless devastating energies exploded from the impact of the two, slamming the quartet madly, completely leveling the mountains and rivers of this Fangshen's country to the ground, like chaos. In the main hall, many of the Supremes watching this scene were all shocked on their faces. The power of the two men's fight has reached half-step Invincible Supreme. No. The average half-step Invincible Supreme cannot cause such a powerful power. It can be said that the two are infinitely close to the Invincible Supreme. Swords matchless, worthy of the name of the first day of the universe. For many years, ever since the 100,000 Chaodong prehistoric kingdoms died in the hands of Shusha, I have never seen such a villain. I wait for the universe to be so proud that it is the blessing of our entire universe. Everyone's eyes are astonished. Even the god of Eo, who occupies the main seat, flashes a glory in his eyes. Shwani, you have a good apprentice. There was a slight smile on the corner of his mouth. What? Delirious Willow growled wildly, and the horrible light waves in his mouth continued to grow stout, and the power increased even more. Talents, primitive universe. Dragon blood secrets. He Jian Wushuang is also eager to crack. He is urged by various mysteries and turbulent powers, and his firepower is full. Next moment. Boom. Two energies finally exploded, and a huge mushroom cloud rose. The whole world of the kingdom of God, trembling madly, as if to be destroyed the next moment. Suddenly at this moment, the three-headed snake Lulu suddenly burst out into a crazy laugh. This is the time. His body burst into pieces, directly turned into a snake with the thickness of an arm, a fierce bounce, turned into a streamer, and instantly appeared beside Jian Wushuang. Soon after, he opened his mouth wide, exposing two sharp and stout fangs with twinkling chills, and biting Jian Wushuang's neck fiercely. Illusion, Curse of Zombie. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.